idea for all this really came from a dream?
Yes, it did.
Good evening and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is Preston Dennett. Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 26 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books have been Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Phenomena Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, Ufologist, and others. His writing has been translated into several different languages, including German, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Icelandic. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and the History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He has taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. Preston, welcome to Nox Mente.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. In fact, you are highly esteemed and also deeply into dreaming.
I am. I love dreams.
I think I had met you at, did you do, I can't recall, McMinnville, Oregon conference, the UFO conference down there. Have you done that one before?
No, I want to, though.
Okay.
I've done UFO Con, which is not too far from there, up in the San Francisco area, a number of times. I've been all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know why I felt like I'd met you there. That one was such a whirlwind for me. It just was interesting, but I had this feeling I had met you there. Anyway, so we're glad you're here. I hope all's well in your world. I was just listening to some of your recent stuff on your YouTube channel, which I subscribe to and love. So
Awesome.
With all that, let's get started. When you were very, very young in your identity as Preston, as far back as you can recall, what kinds of things stick out? What things do you recall now that are still there?
That's an interesting question. I am the fifth of six children. So that had a huge effect on me, living in a very close household. We were a very close family. And it was really hard for me to separate my own identity, really, from my brothers and sisters. I felt what they felt, they felt what I felt, and really had no sense of individuality until I became an adult and moved out, honestly. So it's definitely a good thing. I mean, I look back on my childhood as one of great fun and wonderful adventures for sure. So, except when my big brothers took me hiking up cliffs and trees that were too high and things like that. I was always trying to keep up with the big boys.
Yes.
But
were you afraid of heights?
No, not until recently when I followed my brother up Mount Baldy, and there was this cliff trail for about a mile. It was just a sheer drop on one side.
Oh my God.
And it was 1 foot wide, literally 1 foot.
Oh my God.
I was terrified. It was my birthday. I'm like, well, I'm going to die on my birthday. So yeah, that got me into a little bit of fear of heights for almost 6 months, but it finally faded away.
That's interesting. I don't like heights. I wouldn't even attempt that. It's impressive that you went and did it and pushed through. And it's interesting that it affected you for 6 months in a way that did give you a little bit of fear of the heights, having not had it before.
Yeah, I had a couple of nightmares, seriously,
Ooh.
which I don't normally have. My dreams are not, generally speaking, scary. But
Let's look at a couple of those nightmares before we go back to your early days. Do you
uh,
recall them?
only not in specific, narrative. Just that I was back there on the mountain. I'm like, oh, I thought I was off this piece of man. Oh man, great. How long is this going to go on? So brought it back all that fear of dying. This was not a phobia, by the
Yeah.
way. This was a real, honest to God cliff drop. I'm like, Steven, how come you didn't tell me? I would not have gone on this hike. Like, I didn't know. I didn't know. So yeah,
Sounds like a mountain goat trail.
it was. I'm like, why aren't we seeing any people? Oh, nobody comes this way. I can see why.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
And I finally looked it up. I'm like, well, about 3 people die each year on this mountain. I'm like, man, it could have been us.
Oh wow. Well, and yet it wasn't. So here you are triumphant.
Yes. Yes.
A birthday triumph. So back in the young days, what was your relationship with nature? Did you have one?
Oh yeah. I was definitely very, I guess you would say, spiritual. We had this pine tree behind our house, which stretched up at least 50 feet, possibly more. And I was just a little guy, and I'd climb all the way up to the top of this thing and just stay there for hours and loved it, really loved it. We grew up in a pretty rural area. There was coyotes, bobcat, raccoon, cougar, deer.
Yeah.
And we were always out there camping under the stars. So I was always, very into nature. And
What state
still,
was this?
this is very near where I live now, California. That was Topanga Canyon.
Oh yeah, I know Topanga Canyon.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Not as naturey as it used to be,
Yeah.
but still really beautiful. I grew up actually in Illinois, outside
Oh.
Chicago. And
Where outside?
let's see, it's Waukegan.
Waukegan? Okay, up north.
Yeah.
I'm from the south side.
And that was a beautiful nature area as well.
Yeah, very much so.
But my parents got restless and packed us all into a giant camper, and all 8 of us traveled across the U.S.
Sounds like a Lucille Ball movie.
Hey, or could have been. We stopped at every single, well, not every single one. We went through every state, pretty much. Stopped at all of the national parks, dipped down into Mexico, got stuck, got robbed. That was
Oh
fun.
my.
And ended
How
up
old
here.
were you when that happened?
I turned 8 when we were in the camper in Colorado at the Great Sand Dunes. So that was fun. But yeah, I was just a little guy.
That sounds like a lot of fun to me personally.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah. So back there in these early days, what was the stuff that fascinated you, that you sought out or wanted more of? And this can include cartoons, comic books, the stuff that held your interest.
Shipwrecks. I don't know what happened. I think this might be a past life thing.
Oh wow.
But just shipwrecks. I was, by the time I was 9 years old, I was a shipwreck historian. Seriously.
Oh, wow.
I mean, Titanic, Andrea Doria, you name it. Edmund Fitzgerald. I've got a whole library on shipwrecks, and it kind of expanded to really any type of natural disaster.
But
So
are you a Gordon Lightfoot fan? That's the biggest question.
Who's not?
Yeah.
Oh, seriously, who is not? I love him too. The Edmund Fitzgerald. That, it's interesting. Shipwrecks have fascinated me because they're so eerie. The thought of anything underwater like that is so ghosty, and I don't know. It really, we're talking about another plane, the underwater, and then the process of a shipwreck going down, and the drama that unwinds with that, the human experience of being immersed and all that. I have not been obsessed in the way that you were, but I'm fascinated by them. And I always, when I'm on water and I can look down, like in Huron Bay in the Upper Peninsula, there's a lot of them right under the water. I mean, they're probably, you know how water makes things look not as deep, but they're probably down, but you can see them clearly, and they always give me a chill somehow, but a chill that is a mysterious chill. Wanting to
Yeah,
know what went on.
I love them. Anything to do with the ocean. I was gonna become a marine biologist. Uh, just really interested in the ocean and shipwrecks and ships, but volcanoes and earthquakes and disasters and pandemics and you name it. If alive. Remember the Andes survivors?
Yes.
Um, I've got every book on anyone lost in the wilderness that I can find. I don't know what it is.
Well, it says a lot about your sir. I've got a wolf howling here. It says a lot about where you are now in such a great way. And I love you're one of the people that really digs into the USOs,
That's
which
right.
I love. There's something for me there. And it was the first way I was able to access uh that information about everything that you do now in the world, but before I knew who you were. But it was a way for me to access the idea of others via other beings was through the idea of the water, the deep water especially. And so that's interesting. When you were young, before we get this is just the foundational so we can build a house from here. Uh did you have any fears that were going on? You know, the typical ones like in the closet or under the bed, the dark.
No, starvation maybe. uh, just I have a lot of past life memories. I think as how I interpret this, and just had this real fear of disease and starvation and dying.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from. Caused some concern, not really among my parents, but sometimes at school. I'd write stories, and the teacher would be like, "This story has got an awful lot of, mature subject matter in it." And my parents always laughed. They were super supportive and very loving, and they understood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't a really fearful person growing up. I felt very protected. We were a very strong family unit. Got a little sister, a big sister, 3 older brothers. My parents were really wonderful parents. I was very blessed in a lot of ways. They weren't angels by any means, but
Well, it
did
must
really
be
well.
hard. Yeah, having that many kids and everything. Jerry? Oh, you look like you were going to say something.
I was going to say, yeah, I was just agreeing. No parents are angels. Just
Yeah. But having that many kids and all that, this was one of the things I came to later on in my life was how, when you look back, how young they are, really, with, trying to raise other humans. We always have to give our parents a little bit of slack. Uh, and so, also back in these early days, what was your relationship with dreaming?
I was always pretty much into dreams. I didn't really know what to make of them, but I remember very early. I remember my first dream, actually, that I could recall, because at one point I actually I became very obsessed with dreams. I started getting messages through them, and precognitive dreams and visitations and all kinds of weird stuff.
Ooh.
So I started writing everything down, and I'm like, all right, let's go all the way back. Let's go as back far as I can. And I remember some very early dreams. Like one, I remember I must have been 5 or 6, because this was in our very first house. And yeah, I was 6 years old when I lived there. And it was I thought I saw something in the house, a ghost or something, but it chased me outside, and I ran up onto this little old-fashioned telephone, like a little old telephone pole with a I don't even know how to describe it. The black metal, the really old fashioned.
Yeah, oh yeah. The ones that you stick your tongue to when you're little.
Yeah. And we had a neighbor across the street who had a weather vane with a rooster. And it was turning in the wind. I thought, oh, that's a ghost turning that. That's a ghost. So it was a little bit of it was a very vivid dream, for sure.
Was it scary?
Yeah, I would say it was kind of scary.
How old were you?
Yeah, I could not have been more than 6, but I think it might have been actually 5. And that was really the earliest dream I can remember.
Did you come from a religious household?
Well, yes and no. My parents were raised, I think it was Catholic, and all my brothers were brought to church. I wasn't. They rebelled at some point, and I've never been to church. It's funny because one day my dad comes up to my mom. He says, "I've got a confession. I haven't been taking the kids to church. Every Sunday we go to the gas station. I fill up the car, and maintain it and give them ice cream."
Oh, I love your dad.
And my mom laughed really hard. She's like, I have a confession too. She says, I haven't been going to church either. I take the kids to the park and let them run around. So, yeah, they kind of rebelled.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's fun to hear. It's a gift in the end because it allows you the freedom to kind of go where you need to go spiritually.
Oh,
I think.
Yeah, I feel really blessed because I know some people who are very religious, and they're wonderful people. Don't get me wrong.
Yes, of course.
But I know some people who are very religious, and it limits their thinking in ways.
Yeah,
it really does. In terms of life after death, or ghosts, or UFOs, or anything that doesn't fit into their worldview. First thing they do is they turn to the religion for answers.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm talking about, Preston. Is good, like in those formative years, to just, in my opinion, let the children kind of enjoy their imaginations and find themselves. And then I find that people that weren't raised in a religion oftentimes are deeply, deeply spiritual. I am, and I wasn't raised in anything. I'm very spiritual in a seeker kind of way that includes a reading of the Bible and understanding of those kinds of tomes that I may have rebelled against.
Yeah, it took me years and years to finally pick up the Bible, but I did read it. Well, some of it. It was pretty hard reading.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I started getting interested in all these spiritual writings. I read Butler's Lives of the Saints. That's like a 5-volume set with each has 1,000 pages or something. But it was fascinating stuff. I mean, these saints from ancient times, medieval times, all the way through Renaissance and so on, had all these extraordinary paranormal experiences. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So I did that from a study angle, really.
Yeah, that's me too. And I have found from an academic level, looking at all the different tomes, the Bible included, there's so much content in there. If you're coming from these angles of looking at points of consciousness, looking at these narratives and these stories from a different angle than, say, one of worship. There's some sort of, they take you somewhere, and maybe they take other people other places, but I have found them to be deeply meaningful in those ways, and opening up new gates of perception into the world, the bigger world around us that houses ETs and ghosts and entities and all that wonderful stuff that I'm into.
Yeah, boy, the Bible is filled with all that stuff. It really is.
It is it's actually a spooky tome. So, all right, what about, so when we go into your early days of dreaming, what did, and this may just apply because it may have never changed, but how did you encounter the dreamscape? Color, taste, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've always been a very vivid dreamer. At some point I did start having lucid dreams, but that was a little later on. At this point, no. Uh, yeah, full color, a whole range of dreams. Not a lot of nightmares. As a young man in puberty, I had my share of erotic dreams,
Yeah. Oh,
which
yes.
were amazing. I
I
love
love them
that.
too. All hail the beautiful erotic dreams.
Oh man, yeah. Some of my best experiences, I have to say, have been in the dream state.
Yes, I agree. I'm with you on that.
So yeah, I would say I was on a sort of arithmetic curve, becoming slowly more and more interested in the dream state. But the problem is I grew up very skeptical of all things paranormal. I didn't believe in anything that I couldn't touch. I was a materialist and did not believe in life after death, didn't believe in precognition or ghosts or UFOs or anything paranormal. And it's funny because at age 9, I had a really strong paranormal experience and shrugged it off, even though I had witnesses. My sister was right next to me. We were watching a game show called Treasure Hunt. And I don't know if you remember that, but it's an old game show where they would have like 80 boxes and one had the check in it. And you had to pick which box had the check in it. And that was sort of the end game. But I looked in the audience. I'm like, Victoria, that lady on the third row, she's going to be picked. And she was, and we laughed. And I'm like, oh, and this is the canister with the flowers in it. It's the third one. And it was. And I suddenly like knew which box the money was in. I'm like, it's 78. It's 78. And my sister's looking at me like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, I'm telling you. And sure enough, it was. And we just rolled laughing and didn't know what to make of it. I didn't even really think of it as paranormal. I had no way to label it. And it was just a one-off. So I didn't really understand it.
I find that fascinating, Preston. Had you prior to that, though, been able to, without acknowledging it or realizing it, had that kind of thing happen? Like you knew the phone was going to ring or stuff like, the little things.
Not really. My dad would have that sort of thing every now and then. He was super skeptical too. Just weird things. I remember Obama appeared on, Obama first appeared on the scene. He's like, that man would make a good president. I'm like, Dad, he just became senator. What are you talking about? And
Oh, wow.
another time we're driving along and he's teaching me and he says, we were behind a truck. He says, you never want to drive behind a truck because they'll spit up gravel and it can break your windshield. And he moved out from behind the truck in behind a sports car, which sped off and hit up a piece of gravel, which hit the windshield and broke it.
Oh.
But Dad, you just said that. Wow.
This is interesting. So it seems it's definitely, there's a connection there. I like that. It's like a familial thing between you and your father. He had this. Was he always aware that he was tapped in like that?
No, he was skeptical. When I started to get into these altered states of consciousness, lucid dreaming, out of body experiences, he's like, I should have taken you to church. I'm like, Dad, no, this is interesting. He just didn't believe in life after death or any of this stuff. And I would point out to him his psychic experiences, like, I'm like, you predicted that. He's like,
Okay, yeah, that's what I was asking. So when he would say these things and they would come to pass or in some way, it was just still like a coinkydink.
Yeah. Yep.
That's interesting. I love it when skeptics, I started out very skeptical about things as well. I was not about a lot of things, but some things certainly I feel like I had the wool over my eyes. And so in the dream space when you were younger, what were the first dreams that really started to pump up your imagination? Like what age range were you in there where they started to be something that you were interested in?
Really not until I would say late teens. I was definitely aware of dreams, but I kind of thought of them, I think, in the traditional model as, you watch a movie, you dream about it. You have a fear, you dream about it, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of that it would reflect perhaps, your suppressed desires,
Yeah.
something to do with your psychology, or something you had seen that day. And I certainly recognized that. And I thought, okay, dreams are weird, but I'm not really into weird stuff. But yeah, at some point it did happen. I remember my mom, shortly before she passed away, I was like 18 years old. She says, "Have you ever read Carlos Castaneda?" And I
Mhm.
said, no, who's he? She's like, "Oh, you have a treat. You have a treat in store." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And tragically, she passed like a year later. I was 19 years old, and she was 49. She had a massive heart attack,
Mm,
and poor thing, yeah, it was what a shock that was.
it's terrible.
That destroyed my world. I
Yeah.
could not believe it. I was a mama's boy. I loved her so much,
Aw.
and could not reconcile that she was gone.
Mhm.
And I saw her, I saw her ghost at the service, and I thought, well, I have lost my mind. I am hallucinating now. And I looked at everyone on either side of me. No one seemed to notice anything. This was a full color apparition just a few feet away from me in the car as my dad drove up. And I could tell it was her. I saw her. She's always had a great posture. She was sitting very erect. I'm like, yep, I've lost it. I am hallucinating. I've never hallucinated, like that. And
She was in the car with your dad?
yep, front
That's
seat.
cool.
And
Was she like, did she appear to be solid?
yep,
Like fully there? Wow.
totally solid in color, and it faded away. As I got real close, it kind of pixelated away. And I thought,
Oh,
okay,
that's interesting.
I'm in grief. That's what that is. And it was, I'm going to say, another year when I was in bed in my room, and I woke up, sat up in bed, and my mom walked in, or she walked in, and I woke up. I'm like, "Mom, you're dead. What the heck?" And she just kind of looked at me and smiled and didn't say any words out loud, really, but said, "It's fine," kind of with her eyes. "Everything's fine. Everything's fine."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" And I jumped up to hug her, I think, and suddenly I woke up for real. I'm like, "Oh,
Oh.
that was a false awakening,"
Oh,
which I
yeah.
had not heard of. So I'm like, "Wow, what just happened?" Because I knew it was her. As skeptical as I was of life after death, when you meet someone, you know it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I think I just saw my mom. But that can't be, because there's no such thing as life after death. So I am really cracking up here. Nobody will ever know this. And it happened again. And it was always the same. It happened over and over and over again. I'm going to say 20 times.
In that
And
same period of time?
yep, over about a year. It
Mhm.
was pretty constant, pretty regularly, every couple of days, every week. Because I was in grief. I was waking up crying. I was going to bed crying. I was
Mm.
really having a hard time with it. I wouldn't let anyone out of the house. I'm like, "No, go, you'll die."
Yeah.
I was having a lot of fear. Uh,
Yeah.
so she kept coming to me over and over again. And that's what got me interested in dreams. I thought, maybe this is real. Maybe there's something to this, because I cannot believe that this is not her. And it was so weird because I was always sure I was awake. And I go through this whole kind of theory escalation, like, what happened? I was sure you were dead. I must be wrong. How could I have been wrong about that? I guess I was. Uh, and then I'd wake up for real. And sometimes not for real. I'd have to go through a series of false awakenings.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, am I awake now? And that's what made me, I think by that time I picked up Carlos Castaneda's book, which had an exercise to get lucid in the dream state. Look at your hands.
Yes.
And I couldn't do it, just couldn't do it. And so I started picking up more books on dreams. And I wasn't happy with them. I didn't like the books on dream symbolism. I thought
Same here.
they were terrible,
Hmm.
and they didn't match. And all right, so that's when I'm like, I think I picked up the book on Jane Roberts, and Seth Speaks, and ended up reading the whole series, which was also about dreams, big on dreams. And that's when I said, all right, there's something to these dreams. I know there is. And so I started to become really interested. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start meditating. And I'm going to write down all my dreams and see what happens. And boy, oh boy, it changed my life. I could not believe the shift I was going through. My whole family started to really get worried because I was obsessed with dreams. I wrote down every dream I ever had and I analyzed them. And what I realized was that the vast majority could be explained as some reflection of my fears or desires. Usually, unobtained goals, unobtained desires, and unfaced fears. So I was looking at the dreams that way, thinking, okay, they're psychological, until I had my first precognitive dream, where I saw a friend on the roof, roofing her house. And I thought, wow, I didn't think anything of it until I went up to her house, and there she was on the roof, putting tiles on. And I got this weird feeling of deja vu.
Yes.
And it suddenly swept over me. And I got this, I'm getting chills right now because that feeling I got was like, oh, this is my dream.
Yes.
This is my actual dream. And the whole world kind of became really sparkly and dreamlike. And it very fluid almost, in a way that is very hard to describe. And I'm like, I dreamt this. I actually dreamt this. And that's when I started to realize dreams could come true. Wasn't long after that, I had another dream that I saw these little animals in cages. And I thought, well, this is terrible. I love animals. And I'm like, what is going, why am I dreaming this? Because I'm really trying to find out what dreams mean. And could usually track them down. And this didn't mean anything to me. And I thought, okay. And I was at work and I just thought, I'm going to take a walk. I'm just going to take a walk. I hadn't done that. And I'm walking pretty far down Ventura Boulevard. It's got shops on either side. And I walked up to this shop and looked in the window and got that flash, that weird feeling of walking into a dream, because I saw it. It was these little animals in cages. It was a pet store, which I didn't even know was there, by the way. And I'm like, oh, and
that's why.
I reeled back and got that really weird feeling, like I'm walking in a dream right now, and I know what's going to happen. And that's when I started looking into precognitive dreams. There was nothing out there on the subject, really, in terms of specific, a whole book on just precognitive dreams.
Right.
There's still only a few out there. I'm going to have to write one.
Yes, you should.
But I learned how to have them. I really did. And if there's a technique, I ended up writing an article about it, how to have precognitive dreams. And I tell you, it works. And it's so stupid and simple. Really, the method is dream recall. If you can recall about 4 dreams per night, one of them has a very high chance of being precognitive.
Yes.
If you can get if you're up to 7, just about guaranteed, you're going to have precognitive dreams.
This is fascinating. I've been talking about this a very long time. It was one of those things that hit me the same way. I have been able to tie all my deja vus into dreams back in, and anyone that's followed the show knows this. I have always talked about that's my connection with deja vu. I have always been able to pull back into a dream, and I'm not sure if this has happened for you, Preston, but there have been moments, and a lot lately, where I'll get into that deja vu magic and press into it and know that I had dreamt somewhere. And when I've been able to locate some of these recently, they've gone back to my early childhood.
Oh, wow. Yeah, most of my precognitive dreams happen like the next day, maybe a couple of days. I do remember one where I did exactly what you're talking about, kind of got that feeling of deja vu and leaned into it and let it wash over me and just kind of basked in it until I remembered the dream.
Yes.
And I was at work, and my boss walks in and stands in front of my desk and says, "I just saw a UFO. It was big, it was yellow, it was a disc. Oh, it was so amazing." And I suddenly remembered the dream, which I hadn't remembered up to that point. And I'm like, wow, he said word for word, exactly my dream. The only difference was in my dream, he was for real. He wasn't kidding. But in
Yeah.
reality, he was kidding. He had not seen a UFO. He was just joking around with me.
Yeah, these are the things that why the books bothered me in the beginning. I was so into dreams when I was little. Everyone bought me books on dream symbols and all this. And like you, they all fell short, and they still do. But those kinds of details are very important. The animals in the cage, well, it's a pet shop, and so this misinterpretation is ripe. It's easy to misinterpret symbols. And then the fact that he was, having a satirical moment with you in real life, but in the dream, it didn't seem that way. And there's a strange Vesica Pisces there, the overlap between what is apparently real life and dream life, where those kinds of things don't translate so easily, I have found.
Yeah, it's funny. I started to recognize the precognitive dreams that just had a certain quality to them. That they were realistic, and they didn't
Yes.
reflect anything that I could attach to. But they were usually something I was very interested in, whether it's shipwrecks, disasters. I would dream about them before they occurred, or anything to do with animals, which I'm obsessed with. I love animals
Yeah.
and things like this. And I remember one dream where I was attacked by a baby goat, and I saw it at the bottom of the driveway, and this darn goat runs up to me and knocks me over, and I'm trying to hold it down. I'm like, what? And I woke up. I'm like, okay, that was a weird one. That could not possibly come true. And if it does, this is going to be, I'm going to be a little afraid. I'm like, okay, I don't know what this dream means. And now I know, I probably would have labeled that as precognitive, because that's a real cue for me.
Yeah.
If I can't place it somewhere. But I couldn't. I'm like, there's no way this is going to happen. I'm not going to be attacked by a baby goat. It's just not going to happen. And I watched the news that day, and there was my dream. And I watched, a lot of TV, and so a lot of my precognitive dreams would come true on TV. And this guy had abused his goat, kept it chained up, and this darn thing rammed him and killed him.
Yay.
Yes. I'm like, wow. And I'm like, people, oh, that's coincidence. I'm like, no, you start to look, you get a feeling. And that's really what I go by. But I need it can't be just one detail. It's got to be more than one. If it was just a goat, I'd be like, eh. But no, it's a goat. It rammed him, it killed him, it attacked, it all fit in. So if there's I'm like, wow. So yeah, precognitive dreams are the bomb. I love them. I call it waking lucidity, because
Yes.
that feeling you get when you're in a dream and you suddenly become lucid within the dream.
Yes.
And we haven't even got into that yet, but waking up inside of a dream was stupendous. I couldn't believe it. This was like a whole new world. This was more vivid than reality. And just this flood of lucidity, I couldn't believe it. And so that's the feeling I get when a dream comes true. I get this sort of flood of lucidity, and I'm like, oh, now it's come full circle. I've woken up in the dream state, and now I'm walking into a dream in the waking state.
Yes.
And you're
Yes.
becoming even more aware.
Yes.
And I remember I started to get to the point where I'm like, all right, I've got to tell someone these dreams because no one is going to believe me. I was telling everyone, like, you're crazy. And I'm like, okay. So I had a dream, and I'm like, this one's going to come true. I know it's got the flavor of it. And I dreamt that I was flying over the Arctic, and I looked down, and they were pulling something out of the ice, and they were digging it up. I'm like, wow, this looks really interesting. And suddenly they pulled out this block of ice, and it was in a helicopter, dangling from a helicopter, a big square piece of ice, and it was a woolly mammoth. And I thought, wow, in the dream continued, they sliced it open and did a sort of autopsy, I guess, and pulled out the contents of its stomach. And there were all these leaves and branches and sticks and stuff. And I saw them on the table. I'm like, wow, that is amazing. And I woke up, and I'm like, that's one. And I called Christy, my sister-in-law, because she helped me through my whole spiritual awakening. She is very spiritual, and really helped me with all this because it was difficult, a real difficult adjustment in the beginning. And I'm like, Christy, I had one. They're gonna discover a woolly mammoth in the Arctic. I know it. It's gonna be on the news. I guarantee it. Write it down. Tell everyone. And I think it wasn't the next day in this case. It was a couple of weeks later, and just to see that image of that helicopter carrying that frozen chunk of ice with that mammoth in it, I'm like, wow, I knew it.
Yes.
So I'd always tell her. I remember there was another one with dinosaurs in it, and I was trying to rope a dinosaur, and I got flipped up over it, and I'm like, well, that couldn't be precognitive. And then lo and behold, Jurassic Park comes out. We go to see it, and there's this one scene where the guy gets pulled up and over the dinosaur on a rope, and Christy turns to me all pale. She's like, that looks like your dream. I'm like, yep, that's my dream.
That is amazing. This is where I get a lot of what I call my psychic eye content, is absolutely mining these dreams, because I had learned early on, like you, there is this flavor and you can tap into it. We can push into this. We can absolutely do it. And that's the thing. And another reason why you need to write this book, Preston. Anyone can do this.
Yes, dreams are amazing. Every dream, I think, really is a message from your higher self or some higher part of you, and has a message. There is no such thing as a nonsensical dream. Even if elephants are flying, there's a reason.
Yeah, these are symbols.
Yeah, and every dream, here's something I found really cool, because I was trying to become lucid in the dream state. And that was a tough nut to crack. I couldn't do it for the longest time. And I was trying all these different exercises. And what I found out is that every dream has what I call a cue. There is something in that dream that's not right. It's not like reality. Mm-hmm. Your driveway is facing the wrong way. Your couch is the wrong color. You're wearing a shirt you no longer have. Or you see a bicentennial penny. I had that one. That's my cue to wake up. Mm-hmm. Wake up. I picked up that penny. I'm like, oh, I guess they're making these now. And I threw it away. And so I would always rationalize ridiculous things. I remember I saw someone with 3 eyes, a third eye. I'm like, well, look at that. That is a very strange mutation. So I would rationalize these cues off in some way, and finally learned I had to do really critical thinking and really kind of reality test and look at the dream and actually reality throughout the day. Now I do know. Wherever I am, I'm looking for what I would call an anomaly.
Yes, same here.
Because if you see that, then you're probably dreaming.
Well, this leads me into something. It's a little bit of a meander, but it's something everyone knows I'm going to ask this of you because I ask it of everyone because I experience it. Reality right now, Preston, is so surreal. There's so much stuff where you're like, that could never happen. We never thought we'd see this kind of a lockdown unless you did see it and all that. And I did. But it's so askew. There are so many cues happening in our apparent reality. How is it that we're not actually dreaming now? I mean, where are you with the craziness in the outer world in within this paradigm of dreaming within a dream?
Yeah, I actually am of the belief that reality is essentially dreamlike. And it's the same mechanism to create reality that we do in lucid dreaming. Because I got really good at it, the lucid dreaming, and ended up having full-on out-of-body experiences and going to the other side and meeting my mom and going to higher realms and past lives and healing temples and Akashic library and enlightened masters. And I went all out. And what I found is there's a place on the other side or in the lucid dream state where you can create reality by just thinking about it. Thought rules in the dream state. What you think is like a laser cannon and will instantly manifest. And you can create reality. And I would have great fun with this. When I first started doing this, I would like create, my house and worlds and people and feasts of food and just create, and started to realize this is what we actually are doing in the waking state. This is how reality is perceived. It's reality in the waking state in the physical world is essentially a hallucination that's internally generated. It's a consensus reality. But essentially, yeah, we're all, space is an illusion. We're not really moving. We're all very much connected. Time, as we think of it, is completely different on the other side. You can see the future. You can visit the past. I think reality is a lot more fluid. And I say this not only because of my own experiences, but because of what I've read with, people, enlightened yogis and enlightened masters who are able to manifest stuff, do it through the dream state. I don't know if you've heard of Milarepa, but he's the sort of yogi Christ of India. And he talked about how he levitated for real. He was very well known for levitating. And he first says he learned it in the dream state. And everything that you can do in the dream state will eventually translate into your waking state, which is so cool. Because, yeah, I'm obsessed with all the psychic stuff. And that's doing the lucid dreaming and the out-of-body experiences is what really woke me up psychically. And whenever I would have a lucid dream or an out-of-body experience, I would usually come back with a precognitive dream as well. So
I get a sense, I'm winding back here a little bit. I get a sense when I was listening to you speak about your mother earlier and how she seeded you with the idea of Castaneda and then passed on, and then your experiences seeing her and how vivid and real they were, and then the dream within the dream and the awakening within the awakening. It feels like since you continue to have a relationship with her, my mother died at that same age and a long time ago as well. And my relationship has only grown, but it took a minute to get there. But this feels like she guided you in this direction. Do you see that? I mean, just as an outsider, it really seems like she had a big hand in this.
yeah, I would say so. The very worst event of my life, losing her, had a real bright silver lining because it changed me. it spiritually transformed me. And after visiting me so many times in my dream state, I started to really want to pursue that, and on my terms, because she would visit every now and then. I'm like, well, no, I want to visit you. I want to see if there's life after death. I want to know if what's going on with reality here, and really, got into lucid dreaming, which transformed into out-of-body experiences, and which are essentially the same thing. Lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences are kissing cousins.
Yeah,
They are
absolutely.
the same thing for the most part. And what got to the point where I could get out of body. It took a lot of, actually it wasn't that hard, if I'm to be honest. As soon as I found out about it, I picked up a book by Robert Monroe.
Yeah, everyone.
And
He's done a great service to us.
And yeah, he had exercises on how to do it. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
not sure I believe this. Let's give it a try. Sounds a little scary. Let's do it. And just relaxation, meditation, affirmations, these kinds of things. And I'm going to say it was about 2 weeks I started having very lucid episodes. And after about 2 months, I had my first out-of-body experience. Woke up beside my bed, terrified, in dread fear that I had died.
Yep.
And dived back in because I had this mortal terror of cold, clammy. Oh, it was awful. And woke up immediately and was thrilled. I was 180 degrees. I was so excited. I'm like, this works. And did it a couple of weeks later and got out and made it to the bathroom a little farther out of my room across the hallway. Grabbed the counter. I'm like, wow, I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. I looked in the mirror, nothing there. Got pulled back in. I'm like, hey, there's someone in my room. Who the heck is that? And plopped back into my body. And so after that, I'm like, all right, let's do this. And I got it to the point where I could get out, once a week, usually on weekends when I could sleep late, once or twice a month. And just for a few seconds, really 30 seconds, I get too excited and get pulled back in. Got it up to a minute and started to learn how to see and how to travel, move through walls. And it took a whole year, really, before I got to the point where I could, leave the house and go to, a friend's house or another city. Or that's when I started to say, okay, let's find my mom. And I'm like, Mom, where are you? I'm out of body. Where are you? Mom. And I call her and she wouldn't come. And I was getting pretty upset. And it was I remember I had moved out. I must have been about 26 years old at this point. So I've been doing out of body stuff for a couple of years at least. And popped out of body. I'm like, I'm doing it. It's always so thrilling. And just breathless excitement. And I run out into my living room and I'm always alone. I've read all the books in this and everyone has spirit guides and I feel gypped because I'm like, hey, where are my guides? And there would be no one there for me. I'd always have to make my own way. And came out into the living room and there was this beautiful Black woman. And I recognized her. I don't know who she was. I just knew that I knew her. And she was lovely and she smiled at me and I ran up to hug her and she wouldn't let me. She grabbed my shoulders and spun me around and pushed me through the wall.
Oh, there you go.
I'm like, hey. And I popped out in another area and it was a long involved lucid dream. And then I'm like, hey, show me my brother's new house. He was looking for a house and I was taken to this house. I'm like, hey, this could be his house. I wonder if it is. All illusions disappear because sometimes you project and you create little fantasies. And all the furniture started disappearing, but the house remained. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to tell my brother about this. I think this might be his house. And it never ended up coming true. But at any rate, I flew out of the house. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm still conscious. I'm not breathing. This is amazing. And I'm like, I wonder where my mom is. Mom. And it worked. She appeared right in front of me. And I cannot express the joy of that reunion.
Mm.
And it would be the same as if someone had died and walked into your living room
Yeah.
and announced their presence. And she, died at 49. She had gray hair, wrinkly skin. She looked younger than me at that point. She looked beautiful. She looked 23. And by that point, I was starting to lose my hair, and all my hair comes back when I'm out of body. It's great. I love it because I had great hair. It was really wonderful curly hair, and it all came back. And I'm like, Mom, and we hugged, and she grabbed me by the hand and she took me to the other side, and it was just this incredible journey we went on. We popped out through this barrier into what I would call the heavenly realms.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not religious, but those little. Have you ever seen those checks? Those are kind of personalized checks which shows heaven. There's a rainbow and Jesus, and there's
Yes.
all the lions and then
Yeah.
sheep, and they're all. That's what it reminded me of. It was the air itself sparkled. The flowers had an inner glow. That grass had a green to it that I'd never seen on earth. And it was stunningly gorgeous. And I would challenge the most depressed, suicidal person to be sad for a second there because you couldn't do it. The love permeates you, and you can feel, the source of God, sort of, so to speak. And my mom was like looking at me and just laughing at my reaction. And we landed. We're walking through this field, and there was a river. And she's like, "Watch this!" And she jumps into the river. So I follow her in, and the water was so cool because it didn't get you wet, but it felt wet, and it felt really cool and silky, and it was just amazing. And she picks up this algae and she throws it at me. And I'm like, "Mom!" And she picks up some more and hits me straight on the face. I'm like, "Okay, it's war." And we started to have this little water fight, and then we pulled out of the river and we were perfectly clean. And that's what she wanted to show me. I'm like, "Wow, this is amazing." She's like, "You haven't seen anything yet. Watch this." Takes me up to another higher level, to another realm, I guess. That's the way I perceived it, almost as if you're out of body and then you go out of that body into a higher body.
Yeah.
And it was this really cool crystal realm. And the only way I can describe it is it looked like quartz crystals in every direction, the sort of plane of crystals, some as big as a house, some mountain sized, some like sand, but everything's super sparkly and glowing with light. And it was so cool. And my mom's like looking at me. She sits on one of the crystals and just lets me explore. And suddenly I can see 360 degrees. And I started getting a little, not dizzy, but sort of disoriented. And I'm like, "Wow, this is very strange." She pointed off into the distance and instructed me without words. Everything started to get really telepathic, to look in the distance. And I did. And I had zoom vision. I could zoom. It was so cool. And so that went on for a little while. What else did she? Oh, yeah, she points to the ground and says, "Watch this." And she turned it orange. She turned the crystals orange. And she says, "Eat it. Go ahead and eat that." I'm like, "Are you kidding? Am I understanding you right?" And she's like, "Yeah, eat it. Go ahead." And so I'm like, "Okay." And I scooped it up and I put it in my mouth. And it tasted like the orangest orange juice you've ever had.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if you ever had Pop Rock candy.
Yeah, I used to love those.
It was like that. It started popping all over in my mouth, but much more dramatic wise. It was like alive in your mouth. And it was just the coolest thing. And I just rolled over laughing. And my mom thought that was the funniest thing, watching my reaction. And she took me back to the heavenly realm. We sat down on this park bench. There was other people there. There's little pathways. I've since been there many times and have had a number of deaths in the family. And that's where I usually meet them, pets too. And we talked a little bit. I don't remember some of it. And she wrote in the sky, "I love you, I love you, I love you," with clouds,
Oh.
and said it's time to go. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not going. And a, a tunnel opened up, and I got pulled into it. I'm like, oh, I'm going through the near-death tunnel. This is so cool. And it was twisty and windy and really long. And I popped out, and I was in another place that was a dream world. And I grabbed my dream journal. So this is actually, let me make sure I explain. This is a dream journal.
Yeah.
This is
Yes.
not your physical dream journal. This is my dream journal. And I wrote down what just happened because I knew how easy this stuff was to forget. I knew from practice that you can forget your dreams
Yes.
and
Yeah.
your OBEs really easily. And I had to go down like 4 levels. I was getting upset. I'm like, if I have to go down one more level, I'm gonna forget this. And I woke up and I'm looking around my room and I'm like, am I awake? Am I awake? I think I am, because you kind of know when you are. And man, I just could have levitated. I should have tried. I probably could
Oh,
have.
yes.
I didn't, and I regret it to this day. But it was the most amazing thing. I called up my brother and my sister. Like, we're going out for breakfast. My treat. We're all getting orange juice. So I've got something to tell you. And that was the first time that she took me on a tour of heaven, but it wasn't the last.
This is remarkable. Oh my God, I'm just vibing so hard with this. So where does, okay, I have so many questions. Gee, what's the state of your relationship with your mama now?
I live in 2 worlds, and I think we all do. People think, oh, I don't remember my dreams. Well, you will one day, because you're actually conscious on the other side. We all are. And I talk to my brothers and sisters, there's another world we live in. And it's sometimes very disorienting because I'll wake up there and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, thought you were dead. And then I'm like, oh no, this is the other side. This is the other side.
Yeah.
And then we talk, and the whole family's there. And doing this a number of times, my mom would look at me, and we would all have just normal family stuff, and we talk and do stuff. And I came up to my brother. I'm like, we're out of body right now. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we're out of body. He's like, oh yeah, we are. We're in the other place. What do you call it? He had a word for it, which was kind of funny. Dream, in between place.
Oh, that's
And,
interesting. Jim Bruton says that too.
and I'm like, yeah, we're out of body right now. And actually, we live on Earth. And I'm explaining it to him. And I said, well, do you think you'll remember this? And he's like, no, I'm not going to remember this. I'm like, well, what do you mean? I mean, I've just told you, you can remember this. You'll remember this. I'm going to remember this. Why won't you remember this? And we had an argument. And he got really mad at me. I'm like, I'm not going to remember this. So stop telling me. And I woke up, the next day, and I called him up. I'm like, so did you have any dreams? No, why? What are you talking about? Because I had I talked with you. I'm like, shoot, he didn't remember. So I tried again. I went to my sister this time. And she says, oh yeah, we're in the other side. I'm like, yes, we are. You know that, right? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, are you going to remember it? No, I don't think I will. I can't. I'm like, well, let's try. Maybe you could. She's like, okay. And I said, I'm going to create a UFO. And I did, using thought power. And it was I did a great job. You should have seen this UFO. Silver, beautiful colored lights. It was real close. I'm like, isn't that amazing? She's like, wow, that is cool. I'm like, that's a UFO. You'll remember that. She's like, yeah, I think I might. And I'm like, okay, that should work. And woke up the next morning and called her up. Nothing. Not a darn thing. So I sort of gave up on that. But yeah, the relationship is amazing. It's really cool. And, I don't do it every night. I can go for long stretches without,
Yeah.
any memory of it. But then it comes back. And I'm like, wow, here we are. It's always a surprise. I can't tell you how great it is. I cannot recommend dream work enough. You are missing out if you do not do this.
100% agree.
Could the lack of remembering by your friends and family be indication that it's more of your own construction than real, than their dream consciousness being there with you?
I don't think so, because when you're lucid dreaming or dreaming, you look at people and you can instantly tell whether or not this is a projection, as I would call it, or a
Yeah.
real person.
Okay.
And yeah, you can be lucid dreaming and create people, and they will be your brothers and sisters sometimes. And you know that it's not really them. There's a quality of presence. There's a look in their eye.
Yes.
And right?
Okay.
Yes, I
Cool.
talk about that a lot. You can absolutely tell. And for me, it's always something in the eye.
Yeah, you look in their eyes and their eyes shine and they smile and you just know. There's no mistaking a real person because there's the quality of that presence, and it's wonderful. And early on, when I started having out-of-body experiences, I'm like, I might be dreaming, because everyone's telling me, you're just dreaming. Even though you know you're not. I mean, it just takes one to do it, and you're like, wow, there is life after death. You can go out of your body. This is real. But I couldn't move objects. I couldn't appear as an apparition in front of people. Believe me, I tried. But what I finally did was like, I need proof. This is driving me nutty. I need to find some way to prove that this is real. And so I went out of body and I remembered that. Okay, this is my goal. Because you're very focused when you're out of body. And if you're not, you can easily slip into a dream. So I would be very goal oriented. I'm like, I'm going to go meet my mom. I'm going to go to the Akashic Library. I'm going to learn about a past life. I'm going to go to, this is what I'm going to do this time. And an early goal was to try to move objects. Gave that up, couldn't do it. Or appear in front of somebody, but to get proof. And I popped out of body. I'm like, I need proof. Okay, let's go get proof. And I'm flying around, going farther away from my house, looking for something that I can go while I'm in the physical, that I haven't seen in the physical. And I was just going away from my condo where I lived at that time. And there's the LA River not too far. And I swooped under this bridge and I saw something which amazed me. It's a complete cement aqueduct, cement river on all three sides. But on one side of it, it was just filled with soil. And there was grass growing on it and little plants. And there was a 7-Up can and some bottles. I thought, well, that can't be real. That's got to be a projection, because there's no way grass can grow on cement. There's just no way. And I'm like, this will be a good thing to check. When I woke up, I'm like, all right, I'm going to have my morning coffee and then I'm going for a little drive. And I drove over there and parked, and I climbed down and I looked over the edge, and there it was. And it's funny because I got that same feeling I get when I have a lucid or waking lucidity, where I walk into a dream that comes true.
Yes.
But this was different because I was fully, when you're out of body, you're fully awake. And for that matter, when you're lucid dreaming, you're fully awake too, I think.
Yeah,
But
it's just a tweaking there.
But yeah, I'm like, wow, there it is. I knew this was real. I already knew it. And I don't need to prove it to anyone else because I know. And you can't prove it to anyone else. It's a very subjective thing. Well, I shouldn't say that, because I do know people who have been able to move objects or appear as apparitions.
I have actually been able to present. I have tried to present myself to people, and I have had that happen. So one time, it was with my ex-husband.
Yeah, I learned, one guy was doing a show on out-of-body experiences, and I says, I can't move objects. And this guy called in, he's like, oh, here's how you do it. I'm like, and I knew he was for real, because he was saying stuff that only someone who's had out-of-bodies could really know. We're talking about relaxing. And he says, you can always relax a little bit more. And I'm like, yes, you can. When you're trying an out-of-body experience, you can always kind of let go a little bit more. There are little details he was talking about. And he says, here's how you do it. You pull energy out of your body. You stand next to your body. You can pull energy out of it. So I haven't tried that yet, but that's
See,
on my list.
This is where I don't have enough. Okay, so for me, this is where I become afraid, and I've talked about this a lot, where you did the classic thing at first, and I've said this, and I've encountered people that said they didn't experience this, but I thought I was dead the first time it happened. It was like the very first thing. I'm like, oh my God, I'm dead. And it jerked me back into my body. But one of the things is in the relaxing and letting go further into the experience is I have this fear mechanism, and I don't know where it comes from, Preston. I feel like if I let it go too much, then I will then I will pass for some reason. I'm
Yeah.
not sure how to get past that.
From an early, I don't know, it must have been an early book I read, but I've somehow read that, if you're out of your body, you can't be hurt. You have your golden cord or silver cord, it will pull you back. There's no danger of possession. You won't get lost. You're not going to get too far away. But I have had that. I mean, I would be like out all night sometimes, and it was fine. But one time I'm like going, you start to do this a lot, and you get pulled to the other side pretty quick. That's where all the action is, and you can explore Earth all you want, but the real fun is in the other dimensions. And so I always, that's where I always get pulled towards, and I'd fly up to. This was not too long ago, a couple of years, and I came to this realm because I'd always wondered, is there Earth? Because we have this round planet, and I'm thinking, well, that's not quite what it's like on the other side. I don't think there's planets. There's bubbles or realms or little
possibilities.
Yeah, and so I landed on this place, and the flat earthers would love this because that's what it was like. It was this little section of flat Earth, and I was allowed to explore the very edges to where it went to nothingness. And I was flying around. I'm like, this is awesome. I was super conscious, and I was up there for hours, and I was so far away, and it started to feel so real. But I'm like, you know what? I've got a feeling if I don't go back, I am not going back. I might just be up here permanently. And I got a little bit of a fear there. And that pulled me back.
Yeah.
But generally, no, I go all the way as far as I can go. It's so cool. One time I was like way the F out there. And suddenly realized I was kind of awake in bed. I thought, you know what? I think I could open my eyes right now. But I'm way out there on the other side. I'm like, well, let's do an experiment. Let's just open one eye. And I did. And I could see my room. I'm like, wow, I could probably stand up and, I'm like a step away from bilocating here. This is awesome. But it was a little too disorienting for me. And I got pulled back in, but it was a really cool moment. And it got to a point where I'd be like lying in bed, and I thought my eyes were opened because I could see my room. And then I'd open my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, my eyes were closed. At one point, I convinced myself I had really thin eyelids and I could see my room through them. And that turned out not to be true. It's just when you're kind of in a pre-lucid state and you're meditating, you get this sort of third eye vision and you can see your room. It's the coolest thing.
Yeah. Jerry, you look like you had a question there.
I totally forgot what it was.
I think it was in the flat earth section.
It was something right before that. Oh, you're talking about bubbles. I don't know if that was the same thing.
Yeah.
The other realms. I was just going to say, yeah, I totally agree with that. Like the other planets being being realms that you can go to, etc. Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think it's planetary, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a million miles between stars out there, and the sky is always different. The sky is always kind of white. There's no star. I've never seen stars on the other side.
Neither have the astronauts.
I can't say that I have either. And so there's a lot. I encounter so many different stories that, and I keep an open mind with it all, that it's hard to. So here's a great example. I had learned about the silver cord my whole life because I've been a, an avid dreamer and lucid dreamer and all this my whole life. And uh, like I said, those were the books that were coming to me when I was very, very young. And I have never seen the silver cord. So everyone swears it's there and all this, but I have personally never seen it. And I tell you that I look. I'm like looking for it sometimes. I want to feel it and explore it. And so I don't
Yep.
know. I feel like
Yeah.
a freak sometimes because I don't experience the silver cord.
Me too. Yeah. And there's a percentage of people who don't see that, and it started to really bother me. So that became my goal, and I finally did it. It was so cool. I woke up and I'm floating over my bed, and I'm like, "What the heck is this?" It's all there was this bright, glowing kind of fire hose wrapped all around me. Not quite like a python, but it was circulating around me like a
Yeah.
crazy eight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What's this? What's this?" And I'm touching it and feeling it and looking at it. I'm like, and then it dawned on me because I felt and I traced it to the back of my body, my head or my back. I'm like, "Oh, this is my silver cord." And you know what I did? I dived inside of it.
Oh.
I went inside of it and I followed it to the end into my head. I've never heard of anyone doing this, but this is just what I did on impulse. And I popped out and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm in my head. This is my head." And it was this giant room, and it was very poorly lit. It was very poorly lit and filled with junk, except it had a really bright spotlight in the center, very bright center. And I rushed up to the center. I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." And it was filled with cool stuff, bottles and shelves and packages and books and just neat stuff. But it was vast, and most of it was unexplored, and it was mostly filled with junk that needed some cleaning out. So it was both symbolic and kind of true at the same time. And
Wow.
I've read about what do you call them, multiple personalities,
Yeah.
and they talk about this too, about how you can enter into your head, and there's rooms, and they do all kinds of out of body stuff too, MPD, dissociative disorder.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, you can create rooms," and I totally resonated with that, and I totally see what they're saying, because you can actually do this, and it's really cool.
This is incredible. I'm going to have to the image I've always had with the cord is this is just my imagery around it because like I said, I hadn't experienced it, I've not experienced it, is very much like the umbilical cord in a womb. And so, and like I've thrown that in one of my videos because it became part of a image that needed to be part of that narrative in that video. Uh, that one's called Come and See. And it's, I, so if I do experience that, I'm going to try this. I'm going to just see if I can hover there. And man, I really have looked for it, but I'm going to see if I can let go more and if I can pull in that idea at least because I want to do the follow it up thing that you've just described. Now my curiosity has me with this.
Yeah, I've learned some tricks. I used to request. I'd be like, "Oh, take me to meet my mother. I'd like to meet my mother." Now I just say, "I'm going to meet my mother."
Yeah.
And I make a command.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "I'm going to Area 51, or I'm going to the moon, or what have you." And that works much better. But still, I struggle with that. There's all kinds of experiments I want to do. Whenever anyone else would do something, I'd be like, "Hey, I want to do that."
Yeah.
I wonder, do I wear clothes when I'm out of body? Well, let's check this out. And I popped out of body and I looked down. I'm like, "Oh, great. I've got my dress shoes on, my pants, my dress shirt was a shirt I no longer owned." So yeah, I get dressed up in my work clothes to do astral travel. And
You
so,
know, you said something earlier that is so awesome. I call my daughter, she's my dog, but I call her every time I'm out, like pill, pill, and if she doesn't come, I become very alarmed. Like when you're like, mom, 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 and that's how I do with her. But there have been a couple times she hasn't come, which scares me sometimes because other than that, she always comes. And so that telling of your when that I don't know, I'm just saying that was very meaningful for me in a sense because it led you deeper into this experience.
yeah, I'd loved seeing my pets. Oh man, our dog Maxine, after she died, I was upset because our parents just dragged them off to the, one day and they were gone. They were getting old, but man, you could have told us. Uh, so I was upset and started having uh, out of bodies with her, and she'd be on that other side, and she was a very reserved dog. She wouldn't give you her paw if she didn't feel like it. It wasn't a licky dog, but she ran up to me, gave me her paw, and licked me, and that's what she would usually do. And then, like the 20th time, she comes running up to me and she says, "Hi, Preston." I'm like, "Maxine, you can talk."
Oh, Maxine.
And turned out that is a thing. I read this in other accounts because I'm like, wow, this dog talks.
Yeah.
So it was very cool. Yeah, the out of body stuff is so much fun. I'm like,
Did
what's your
you? Oh, I'm sorry. Carry on.
one thing I wanted to say is like I wanted to explore my body a little bit. So I'd found out what I wear, but I wondered like, what do I look like naked? So I took off my clothes and I'm like, yep, I look pretty good. I look just fine. I'm much younger. Everything looks normal. And Robert Bruce said, if you actually stare at your hands, they'll disappear. And I'm like, well, no, I don't think so, because I've looked at my hands, I've turned them over, I've seen, I've got no scars. I'm like, but let's do that. So I popped out of my body and I remembered Robert Bruce's experiment: stare at your hands and they'll disappear. And I did, and he was right. They slowly faded away, and my arms were like stumps, and it was alarming at first, but too cool to pass up. And they just kind of faded away, and then I became this little ball of light. I'm like, oh, all right, this is really cool. I kind of like having a body, but this is fun too. So all the experiments are so much fun. Saying your name, there's mantras you can say. It's really cool.
Ooh, go into that a little.
Yeah, I read Uspensky. He's this famous philosopher who said, you can't say your name in a dream state. I'm like, well, you got to be kidding me. I'm sure I can. He says, no, if you
Challenge
do,
accepted.
if you do, you'll wake up or something amazing will happen. I'm like, okay. And I read some other accounts and people did have some really cool stories where, their name would be carved in fire or something. And so I said my name, Preston. Nothing happened. I'm like, Preston Dennett. And the sky, I was transported to this other realm, the sky filled with firecrackers and fireworks, and there were shooting stars everywhere, and there was my name in lights. And the whole world shook. I'm like, wow, okay, maybe there's something to that. And did it several times to the point where nothing happens anymore. Well, like, all right, I wore it out. But there's this other mantra. I have to tell you this. This I got from this guy, Samael Ayan Weor, who's a spiritual guru kind of guy from Mexico, who's written a series of books and has these methods to become enlightened. And he says it's all about going out of body. I'm like, all right, I'm attracted to this. And I went to some classes with a little group and I read his books. And he has this mantra, which is so ridiculous. It's, let me see if I can get this. Rayom, Gayom, Om, Bor, Bu, Mama, Papa. No, Rayom, R-A-O-M. Gayom, Om, Bor, Bu, Mama, Papa. And if you say these words, according to Samael, in the dream state, something amazing will happen. And the guy who was teaching this class wouldn't say what happens. He says, you'll just have to do it yourself. I'm like, okay. And this was a big ask, because that's a long phrase to remember while you're out of body or in the dream state. And I did it. I finally, I think I was lucid dreaming. And I remembered, and I transposed it. I think I said Geom first instead of Reom, but it didn't matter because I got about halfway through it, and the most amazing thing happened. I stayed up all night. I had about 12 dreams, and they all started playing out simultaneously. It was the craziest thing, and I'm watching them because it's all about remembering. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
there's this dream. I got to remember that one, but this one's more interesting. Oh, look at this one. Oh my god! And I remembered like 7 of them. But man, that was the most amazing experience. And I've had worked with that several times, and it's always really cool. It's definitely something people should try.
Okay, so what is that again? Rayom.
Yeah, Raom, then Geom, spelled the same, then Om, like the meditation, Bor, Bour, Bu, Bu, Mama Papa. When I first heard that, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But now I pop out of my body and I'm like, Ray, and boom, the whole world starts shaking. And I'm like, wow. And one time I popped out of body and I came into my living room and I just repeated that mantra over and over and over until the whole world just shook apart. It had such power to it. It is very strange. I'm not sure what it is, but
It's incredible. What is this guy's name?
He's actually really well known. Samael Eon Weor, Weor. And he's just kind of this Mexican enlightened master, I guess you might call it, who achieved enlightenment and had this method that he wanted to teach everyone else how to become enlightened. And it's all about leaving your body. And I thought that was really cool. And it's got some really strong religious overtones to it. But it definitely was, interesting to try the mantra. Got to try the mantra. It's amazing.
I'm gonna try the mantra. I don't mind religious overtones at all. I have no knee jerk to any of that. That is incredible. What, Jer?
When do you do this? When you're in your dream state or before you sleep or what?
No, you have to be in the dream state, lucid dreaming or out of body.
Okay.
Or it doesn't work. But it definitely works when you're out of body.
I can't wait. I'm gonna try it tonight.
Me too.
All these experiments I wanted to do. One was like, if you're right next to your body, you get pulled right back in.
Yeah.
There's a strong magnetic force.
Like that jerk.
Yeah. So what I would do is I'd pop out of body and I'd stand right next to my bed. And it was tough because there is this magnet that wants to pull you back in.
Yes.
And I'd walk around my bed. I'm like, all right, I'm playing with this. And I got it. So it won't pull me back in. And another time I'm like, I'm tired. I think I'm going to go to bed. And I laid down and all of a sudden I felt the vibrations, the vibratory state.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my eyes are open. I haven't even come to bed. I think, oh my God, I'm going. And I kept my eyes open. And this is not something I've only done once because that was scary. That was. Because usually, you're kind of ready for it. And got pulled out of my body with my eyes wide open. And it was the strangest thing because suddenly, you can see your room shrouded in darkness to a certain extent with the light under the door and, coming in through the window. But as soon as I popped out of body, there's a weird silvery outline to everything when I'm out of body, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that was the coolest thing ever. So that was another real big step for me. Just boom, out of body without any effort.
Interesting. Yeah, I've done a lot of poetry on the way it looks for me with that silvery outline. And it's funny who gets that and who doesn't, in some of my poems. I think you're my favorite for dream content. You are my favorite person. This has been amazing. So I don't even know. Okay, so I want to get into a little bit of woo and darkness. So in in your travels, when you encounter other, so whatever they be, and since you being you, the whole ET thing, all this stuff tied in, how does all that play out for you when you're out of body?
Well, it does influence my decisions, in my travels to a certain extent. I wanted to see aliens out of bodies, so that was something I wanted to do. The first one was not super satisfactory. ET appeared, but it didn't look like something I would expect. It was kind of this dog, horse-faced creature with whose knees bent backwards. And I sort of had the sense that I was projecting or creating it.
Sounds
But
goetic.
but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was a little weird. But then one time, not too long ago, I'm, out of body and I'm trying to get to the other side, which sometimes is not as easy as others. I get caught in this lower realms, these foggy realms, or trying to get to what I would call the heavenly realms, which is where it sort of starts for me in terms of like the other side, which is not true at all, but that's where I like to be. And saw someone up ahead of me. It's this really foggy place, just endless fog. And I'm like, that looks like two dark eyes. And I'm getting closer and closer. And as I zoomed up right next to it, it was a gray alien. And it was just 2 feet away. And it stared at me and swiveled its head as I whizzed by. And my heart jumped into my throat for just a second when I saw how close he was. I'm like, wow, that was a gray. And I surprised him. I saw his eyes, I guess, get a little wider. And I just kept going.
And it recognized you. I mean, it saw you as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, because so there was that recognition and you knew it was other. It wasn't you.
Yeah. And there's been a few things like that. Here's one I don't normally tell people, but I'll tell you. I was in bed and very lucid. And anyone, I'm sure, would have thought I was asleep. I'm sure they would have thought I was asleep because I was, but my mind was awake, and I was awake. It's hard, it's an enigma, but you get it. You can be both asleep and awake at the same time. And suddenly I felt a cat walk across my bed, and I thought, well, that's odd because I don't have a cat. And what is that? And so I just opened my eyes. And I sleep on my side, and I was looking to the right of my bed, and I could have sworn I saw something standing next to my bed, a little skinny gray thing, and it looked almost like a pole, and I couldn't see any head or body, I saw something, but this thing darted out of my room so fast, like a firecracker, that I couldn't believe anything human could move like that. And as a UFO researcher, I've recognized that as, movement that's described by other experiencers in terms of how a gray might move. They dart around sometimes. And my heart went thump, 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 thump. And I got really scared for a second. And I rolled over and went back to, I'm going to roll over and I'm going to go to sleep, which is contrary to what you'd think you would do, but is absolutely what often happens when someone is visited by an ET. So to this day, I wonder about that experience. I don't know. I can't say that I was visited or not, but I wonder.
Yeah.
Going back to like spirit guides, that was another thing that bothered me. Like Robert Monroe has his buddy, he takes him everywhere. And my mom will appear infrequently, but I had like nobody. And I'm like, and I'm doing all this stuff. And I'm like, finally I read somewhere like, oh, your spirit guide is actually behind you and guiding you. And if you just turn around, you'll see them. I'm like, well, I don't think so, but I'll give it a try. And I popped out of body and I'm flying down my home road, this is Cheney Drive. And I remembered, I'm like, oh, maybe I have a spirit guide. And so I whirled around and there was a coyote stalking me. And I got an instant impression. Impressions are a big deal out of body.
Yes.
and you have to really be sensitive to them. And so if you get an impression, believe it and follow it.
Yeah.
And my impression was this was a spirit guide, and he was a Native American, kind of in trickster form, a shaman. And I've got all the books on shamanism, so I really resonate with Native American culture. Had some past life recall with dreams and out of body stuff, and one was definitely Native American. And I did that several times, and it was always this darn coyote, and I couldn't get a word out of him or anything but kind of this ha 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 kind of thing. I'm like, all right, fine, stalk me, watch me, whatever you want. But it would be nice if you'd introduce yourself once in a while. But no, I'm out there on my own for the most part.
That's interesting. I too have, I guess I need to turn around because I'm always on my own as well. And I don't know, sometimes what I've wondered is because I've always been on my own in this life. And that's been like a running theme. And I wonder sometimes if that's just carryover, if that's how I am. I feel very fine with it. Like it's not a sad thing or melancholy at all. But I have been curious about people who talk about their spirit guides and all this. Now I have reoccurring people that come around that I don't associate from my life as niche here in this where my body's attached.
Yeah, your other side friends, so cool.
Yeah, yes, aren't they? They really are. I was wondering also so some of my experience with I just recently encountered some what I call hybrids, but they're hybrids that are amongst us here in this realm, in this outer world. And they're the ones that I've been seeing around in my life, period. But that have really great lace wigs and normal clothing. But if you strip all that off, you see that general form, those oval faces that are ironically thrown into the modern culture as the face of beauty is always like the oval face. Eileen Ford really pushed that. It's just interesting that also finds a place in the hybrid world and in the gray world and this general kind of skinny body. And so I'd encountered these three recently in an experience I was having. And they had, like I said, they had stripped off their lace wigs. I say lace wigs because they look lace wigs look like hair growing out of your head in real life. And clothing, and they were doing work and they just couldn't be bothered by anything. And they were of normal skin tone. So they're hybrids. So they had normal human skin tones of varying shades. And they were not even bothered by my presence at all. They just continued on task. And I thought, isn't this odd? Isn't this odd? It's like they weren't threatening. I wasn't a threat to their presence, but they were doing some what felt like interesting stuff with stuff coming up out of the water. And so they were projecting, or whatever they were doing with this tech was brought up this water dome, waterfall, wall of water. And it got me to thinking about, again, where is this line of reality? Where's the reality base here? Because I'm always testing it as well. Oftentimes I'll throw up a piece of paper and see if it stays. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm always testing, like, where am I? Because of the awakenings and the dream within the dream experience that gets me confused sometimes. So with that, what I'm getting at is, how do you parse through and sifting through data you get from people and your own personal experience? What are experiences that you've been inducted into from other intelligences versus just participating in a scenario or a scene, being part of a scene, I guess, where it's not really an abduction, you're just there too.
Um, I'm not sure I've had a whole lot of experience with that. Interestingly enough, because I mean, I have seen ETs on other occasions. In fact, just recently, I've had two very strange dreams with this 8 foot tall gentleman.
Ooh, give us some of that first.
Because I have this UFO obsession.
Yes.
It's in my family. I have family members who've had very intense experiences. I personally have had a lot of sightings. I know there's a UFO connection. I've had some interactive sightings with telepathy where they've kind of talked to me. So I know there's contact on some level. And it's frustrating because I don't have memories of being on board a UFO. Not like the people I've interviewed.
Yeah.
But occasionally I'll be on board a UFO in the dream state. I remember one time I'd read this book by this contactee, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you can meet our aliens. All you have to do is meditate on it." The andromes, they called. And so I'm like, "All right, let's do this." And I suddenly, I would concentrate on that each night and woke up, and there they were. I recognized them immediately. They looked very much like grays. I was in this room, and I sat down across from them from the table, and they're like, "You wanted to meet us." Telepathically is kind of what they sent. And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "Here we are." And I'm like, "Okay." And then they put me to sleep. And I'm like, "You're not putting me to sleep." And I fought for consciousness. And they were much more powerful than I was. And they put me to sleep in the dream state and woke me up. But it was cool. But most recently, in the past week or two, I had this dream with this 8 foot tall gentleman. And I was in this weird room and there was workshops going on. It was a very spiritual environment and felt really nice. And this 8 foot tall guy walks up to me and I'm like, "Holy cow, look at you." And I couldn't see his face. It was kind of eluding me. And that's something I hear a lot with contactees, by the way. And he showed me how he could walk through solid objects, and he radiated intelligence and spirituality. Sometimes I'll pop out about him and I'll be like, "I want to meet an enlightened master." And I've been successful on at least 2 occasions, or what I would consider successful. And this felt like that. I felt like a little kid next to this guy. I'm like, "Oh, you're so cool. How will I know you? How will I ever recognize you?" He says, "You'll know me because you'll have to look up physically, not like look up to me, but look up." I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, okay." That seems a kind of an odd thing to say, but whatever. And I woke up and I'm like, that almost felt ET-ish in a weird way. And it was a couple of days later. And mind you, I'm going out in my backyard these days, meditating and shaking my fist at the sky and "Take me, take me. I've written books for you. It's the least you could do." And I will get exciting every now and then. When I do that, a light will appear. I'm like, "Wow, it works." So that's what I've been doing. And I did get a light on September 4th. This light appeared. And I'm like, "Wow." And it wasn't a shooting star. I've taken all kinds of astronomy classes, and I know my astronomy. And this was not a shooting star or a satellite or a plane or a helicopter or anything that I could relate to and get a feeling from these things. And so I got that flash of, "Hello, it's us. Be patient." And it was just 2 days ago, I had another one of these dreams, and I'm in this weird room. My first thought was hotel room. I'm like, "But this doesn't look like a hotel room. The walls are all gray, and they're rounded at the edges." And I thought, "Ooh, rounded edges. I know what that means." And I'm kind of looking around. There's nothing in it, and I'm not quite putting it together. But it's the perfect description of the interior of a UFO. There was a little table there. There was a woman who I couldn't quite make out. I thought maybe it was my mom. And I'm like, "No, does that look like Fran Drescher?" That Fran Drescher. So I have that's my cue. I have a queue of famous people. In every dream I have, there's some famous person. I don't know what the heck is going on with that. But that's something that happens to me for whatever reason. So I'm looking at her. I'm like, that looks like Fran Drescher. And she had, by the way, possibly reported a UFO abduction. So that was another weird clue. And then up walks this, I started walking around exploring. And I was going to go into the next room, which I had a feeling I really wasn't supposed to do. But I went anyway because, I'm harmless. I'm not going to touch anything. And I was looking outside. I could see through the walls outside into water. And that was another cue. These are all very consistent descriptions of what people describe where they're inside of a UFO. And I just wasn't picking up on it until afterwards when I woke up. But this 7 or 8 foot tall guy walks up to me and I recognized him. It was this guy. He was wearing white clothes, which aren't quite normal. They're a weird texture, but kind of cloth, kind of not. And I could see his face this time, and it was a normal face for the most part. Eyes are always different with these ETs, and there was something there, but very white skin. And he radiated this intelligence, and it was so cool. And I looked up to him, and that's when I recognized him because I'm looking up at him. And gosh, what did I say? I'm like, where's the heater? Where's the heater? And he showed it to me. And that was basically it. And I was talking to a contactee. I'm like, this is what happened to me. She's like, oh, the heater, that's the engine room he was showing you. You just misinterpreted. I'm like, oh, well, that would make sense. So that is how, I've had some ET involvement and I can feel they're guiding me. I do feel it. But I don't know. I don't know what my relationship is with the ETs.
What is okay? And so, just kind of, I know we're getting close to the end here. I wanted to, before we have questions from people, what have you been dreaming that possibly we could take to the precog level of future stuff since there's so much craziness going on? What have you been seeing? Have you been seeing anything moving forward?
No. My precognitive dreams usually happen the next day. The most recent one was about 4 days ago, and I dreamt I was in an apocalypse. Maybe this is precognitive.
Hello.
And the world had essentially fallen apart, and I was with this person trying to head north up the coastline, and the mainland, on land, it was just such a mess and so dangerous. We were walking in the water up the coast.
Yes.
And we came upon this area where there were grapefruits flooding the water, the ocean, and about 10,000 grapefruits. You could smell them. They were beautiful. And I'm like, wow, we're swimming through grapefruits. This is so odd. This feels like another world. And I woke up and I thought, this feels like a precognitive dream, because it was just so odd. And it related to nothing. And I'm like, well, I don't know how this can come true, but I have a feeling I'm going to see a grapefruit today. And I'm not going out. I'm staying home all day. I'm not even opening the door, so we'll see how this rolls out. And I turned on the TV, and often it'll be a news story.
Yeah.
And like, well, nothing there. And I turned on my computer and I checked my emails. And it was the first email, and there was a big grapefruit. And it says, grapefruit, it's the most unusual fruit. And here's why. And who knew that grapefruits were this fascinating? They kind of appeared magically a couple 100 years ago. No one knows quite where they came from. And they've got this very peculiar property with medicine. Don't take grapefruit if you're taking any kind of medication, because it will amplify it to the point where it can become fatal. And I never knew this.
No, that's interesting.
It's a vitamin K thing, right?
I don't know exactly what it is. It's some chemical in there.
Yeah.
But I looked it up in other sources and talked to some people, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm not allowed to have grapefruit juice. I'm like, well, this is good to know. I'm not on medication, but
if you could die.
But yeah, a lot of my precognitive stuff, it's like animals or shipwrecks. If there's a shipwreck, anything that affects me, I will usually dream about it first. Someone
Yeah.
gives me a gift, or someone gets a haircut, or if I'm getting an unusual visitor, or I'm like, once I saw this horse was drowning. I'm like, oh, this is the saddest thing. And I had its name and everything, and there were people surrounding it, holding its head up. It was stuck in this little puddle. And I woke up, I'm like, this is going to come true. I don't even want to turn on the news. And I turned on the news, and there it was. And the horse lived. So I'm like, really happy. But it was so perfect. I mean, I had every detail.
Yeah. With the one with the water, so the water was inland, right?
No, it was the ocean, and it was now that you mention it, I hadn't even thought this was the East Coast, up towards Maine, I guess. Ooh,
Yeah.
I have a friend up there. She's been wanting me to visit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that.
Because that ties into my latest one, where significantly I was talking about that on my Revolution radio show this weekend. And so that I just find that interesting. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, before the pandemic hit, I was in January, I started to get really depressed. And I'm an emotional guy. Sometimes the earth gets to me because I get homesick for the other side. No, that's the worst danger. I think if anyone's going to do this, that's the thing you got to watch out for. You will miss going there. And I just started getting really depressed. I'm like, you know what? This feels like the kind of depression I get when someone dies. Because I had that when my friend's father died, and occasionally I'd get this feeling of like, oh, someone's going to pass. And it was crushing. I'm like, well, gosh, I follow it. I lean into it, like you said. And you can usually follow it to a person or a group. And this was just everything and everywhere. I'm like, something bad's coming. and I'm like, do I have water? I'm a little bit of a survivalist.
Yeah, it's wise to be.
And bought up on everything except toilet paper. So I was almost prepared. I was down to my last square by the time toilet paper became available.
This is craziness, the toilet paper. So Jerry, do you have questions? I can't imagine you don't.
I have two.
Oh, cool.
Yes, only two. All right, so the first one was, what do you always wish you've dreamt of but haven't?
I have tried, I'm not religious, but I've tried to see Jesus. So I called out for him like I did with my mom. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus Christ, our Lord Savior. And that hasn't happened.
Very interesting.
I want to go to other planets, and I haven't been able to do that, but I did make it to the moon. And that was so awesome. And no one will ever believe me, but I did it. And I know Robert Monroe talked about doing it, and so that's how I got the idea.
What was there? What was this?
Oh, it was so cool. I popped out of body. It was still dark. I saw the moon. It was full. I'm like, all right, let's go there. I'm like, to the moon. And it was taking a long time. I'm like, boy, you better go faster because I've got 5 minutes where I can stay awake. And it sped up, and you kind of get to the point where you can teleport. Honestly, you don't travel the same way. You just blink and you're at your location.
Yeah.
And I'm coming in for a landing, and I landed on the moon. I'm always excited. Who am I kidding? But I was so excited that time. I'm like, I'm walking on the moon. And there was just dust and craters, and it was beautiful, just stark. And then I saw a dome. And I thought, oh, look at that. That is man-made. That is human-made. That's artificial. And if you look into the moon, there are objects on the moon. I've interviewed people firsthand. I've researched it. I've got books. I'm going to write a book on this. There are UFOs. There's all kinds of artifacts, structures on the moon. And I'm like, this could be one of them. And for that matter, active moon bases with humans in them, according to government whistleblowers. I don't know if that's true. It's the fringe edge of UFO research, but here I am out of body. So I dived into this dome, and I got so upset. It was humans in there, and it was 2 long rows. It was a rather long room with tables and experiments with animals on them, and they were doing genetic experiments.
Oh
And I
my.
was so upset. I was having trouble focusing. I started to phase in and out. So I rushed up to one of the tables and I focused on it, and I saw a horrific, vivisection. And I got pissed off. And I did my best to destroy the place, which kind of pulled me out of it, I think. So I'm knocking over tables, which I don't think I was really doing. I don't know, what quite happened towards the end of that, but I lost it. Yeah, I was very angry.
You've heard the story about Ingo Swann remote viewing the moon, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They noticed him. That was what I was going to bring up. So maybe you got noticed too.
Yeah, one time I'm like, let's go to Area 51. This should be fun. Because I heard other people who had done that, and I did it. Darned if I didn't do it. And I was about to go in there, and when I thought, oh, the aliens might notice me, because they noticed the other people who went there.
Mm.
And I got a flash of fear, and that pulled me back. But I ended up going back in a dream state. And I think it was actually an out of body, but I remembered it as a dream. And it was terrible. Oh, what an awful place.
It's military,
Yeah.
It just begs a question. So when you're out of body and you're experiencing these moon labs, where is that space? Is that physicality on the moon? Is that astral realm of the moon? Is it the quote unquote fourth dimension? I'm curious what your opinion is of where you actually were.
Physical. I'm going to say I was physical, but it's tricky because you can pop out of your body. And once the second you're out of your body, I think, and I can't prove this, that you're actually in another dimension, and it's not the physical world. It's a duplicate of it, or it's an echo, or it's inextricable from it.
Okay.
It's like a fractal.
But it's part of it. And I feel like, I wasn't on the other side or an interdimensional side of the moon, because you can go at the other side and see all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But no, that I felt was physical. But
Okay.
yeah, sometimes I'll pop out of body, and there's I remember once I popped out of my body and ran outside of my house, and there was some ghosts there, some evil dudes who were murderers. I mean, I knew it instantly. These were guys who had died and were terrible people still on Earth. And you're supposed to project love, and I'm like, nope, I am going back in my body. Sayonara. Because these guys made a beeline for me. They were going to harass me. And I'm like, I'm not having it. No. So I fled.
Have you ever seen that movie, The Frighteners?
I think I'm not a huge fan of horror, but I dig.
It is kind of a horror movie, but it's more of a comedy.
I may have.
It's an old Peter Jackson movie with Michael J. Fox, and he can see ghosts while he's awake.
I don't remember seeing that. I would have. Yeah, Michael J. Fox. No, don't think I've seen it.
You might enjoy it. Just check it out sometime. All right, got one more question. How do your experiences correlate to what you read in the Castaneda series?
Oh, well, I would say vastly different. I loved the Carlos Castaneda books. I thought he was the bomb until I read another book where it turns out he plagiarized a lot of it.
That's the drama around it.
And no doubt, I mean, one of his teachers was the guy who said, 5 + 2 = 6, and would convince crowds of people to answer 6, and then had the skeptic actually change his answer. So he would bend reality. He was a trickster guy, and I appreciate what he did. But a lot of what was written there is not what I experienced, really. But there was a certain shamanistic element, and I do feel that Carlos Castaneda probably did meet a Don Juan type character and had some really amazing experiences with him. But yeah, I credit Carlos for initiating my sort of pathway towards enlightenment. So I'll give him that. But I don't know. I'm a little mad at him because I read some passages from Patricia, or gosh, was it not Patricia Garfield? That's a dream lady. Another shaman lady who he plagiarized her word for word several times. I'm like, you dude, that's uncool.
Yeah, there's a lot of that drama, and he lost a lot. I mean, the people that were paying attention to it. For me, still, sometimes it's like the messenger in his case doesn't matter so much as some of the enjoying the stories or just what they are. And the hand technique has always been a very good one for me, and even the dream walking has been a little bit fruitful as well.
Yeah, I like the Australian, the Aboriginal, the dream time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I really resonated with that. But I had to call it for past lives. I don't know if you've ever done this, but take me to a past life. It's the funnest but weirdest thing, because usually what happens, at least for me, they take you to the death scene. They'll take you to whatever's most traumatic, whatever you're carrying over, whatever phobia. So there I am being, slaughtered over and over again, eaten by a lion, or killed in the Holocaust. One was, I freed myself as a slave, so that wasn't a death scene, but it was definitely traumatic. One was a Native American spirit walk. One was being killed in a shipwreck, so there's that. One was being raped and killed. I pulled myself out of that one because I'm like, all right, take me to past life. And suddenly I'm a woman about to be raped and killed. I can see the guy. And I'm like, you know what? No.
Let's skip this one.
Let's skip this. And I did my technique to get back, which is wiggling your toes and fingers and opening and closing your eyes.
That's your technique?
Yeah. Usually fear will do it. All I need is just the slightest emotion. The trick is staying out, not getting back.
Yes, that's what I always say. Fear does it for me every single time.
Yeah, works like a charm.
It's amazing.
I got one more question. Someone wanted to know your thoughts on Diane Pasulka, and is she a worthy successor of LA?
Diane Pasulka? Why does that name sound familiar?
She wrote a book called American.
Oh, yeah.
American Gothic.
Yeah, I know.
I forgot what it was called.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like she's approaching it from a pretty skeptical angle, but yeah, it's got some really cool stuff in it.
Absolutely.
I try not to comment on other researchers because it can get very controversial. And there are some researchers out there who are on my naughty list. I'm like, you guys are disinformation artists.
I know two of them right off the bat.
And I'm like, that is just disingenuous and terrible. And how could you?
Yeah.
Like some of these Roswell guys who purport to be researchers, I'm like, you are just out of your mind.
Yeah.
Backtracking on Roswell when they know it's full on real.
Right.
So yeah, some of these guys are definitely on my naughty list for sure.
Yeah, there's some definitely naughty boys and girls in the scene.
I don't consider Diane Pasulka to be in that group.
No. She's got a good energy.
Definitely. That's all I got. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a great conversation, and it's been great talking to you.
Preston,
did you want to plug anything before we let you go?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want to visit my website or contact me, if you've got a story to share, a comment or whatever, I'd love hearing from people. My website's prestondennett.weebly.com. Got all my books there, and you can contact me through there. Got a YouTube channel, which I'm having all kinds of fun with.
Yes.
And yeah, and the only thing I would tell people is if you have never done this lucid dreaming out of body stuff, do it. Don't waste another day. You can thank me later, but do it now because you will love it. I mean, you can fulfill any fantasy. You can eat any food you want, have sexual fantasies. You can travel to other worlds. You can meet your deceased loved ones, meet enlightened beings. visit healing temples, learn about your past lives. The stuff you can do is insane. I cannot believe this is not more popular.
I agree. And we all can do it. This is all within everyone's reach.
Yes, it's a natural human talent. We're all doing it every night. You must remember your
That's
dreams.
the key. That's the key, the silver key. Preston, you have been, I'm crowning you my favorite Nox Mente guest, and we have an impressive list of people. And I say that in Nox Mente because this show is about dreams and consciousness and all this stuff, and you brought everything to the table. Absolutely amazing. Thank you. What an honor.
Yes.
Oh, shucks. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks everyone for listening. I put all of Preston's links in the show description, and they're in the show notes on our Discord server. What else did I want to say about? Oh, I'm going to be at Flattoberfest this weekend in Greenville. So if anyone wants to meet up, just send me an email. Whatever. We'll have a drink. We'll have a beer at Flattoberfest.
Will Alex be there?
Don't think so.
That'd be a hoot.
But Jason Lindgren's going to be there.
Okay.
And Freeman and Mike Williams.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so definitely going to hook up with those guys. Anyway, so thanks so much for listening. Next week we have, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Navia Alora?
Navia, or yeah, something like that. She's fabulous. She's been on Lighting the Void quite a few times.
Okay. Yeah, she in fact has a Lighting the Void t-shirt on in our thumbnail. So
yeah, she's fabulous.
Great. So thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Nish. Thank you, Preston, once again. And we will see you all next week. Have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Sweet dreams.
Mm-hmm.